Good evening, everyone. We are back in Joshua chapter 6. Now, as we had looked at Joshua chapter 5, they had just celebrated, or what the text said, they just performed the Passover. They also had the circumcision ritual for all the males. And so they had the circumcision, they had the Passover, and there was a recognition that from that time onwards, they had no more man or manna that we call it, and they were going to eat of the produce of the land. And these are big changes as to the entire provision of the children of Israel. Know very clearly now that they are already inside the promised land on the western shore of the Jordan. And the fact that they had crossed the Jordan and they had crossed it by God doing a miracle, drying up the Jordan so that they can walk past, similar to the Red Sea, had caused all the kings of the land to tremble. And the text tells us that their hearts melted and their spirit was gone. And that's the kind of the rumors and the news that spread it out that goes before the children of Israel, that everyone is so terrified of the Israelites because they have a God that is living and it's powerful. And it's beyond them, that they have never heard nor seen before. And so now is the first encounter in the land of Canaan, right? The promised land. And so we read here, very popularly taught in our Sunday school, basically to tell us that this is the war with Jericho, or Jericho, right? And this Jericho, as you know, in chapter 2, they had sent 2 spies in. And so the spies made an agreement with Rahab, and to protect her and the family. And so all of these things are now in play. The commitment of the children of Israel, the commitment given by the 2 spies, and how God is coming in to engage in warfare with them. Now, in chapter 5, we read of the commander of the army of the Lord, and then thereafter, we don't see that character anymore. And what we do see now is the instructions given to Joshua how to engage in this particular warfare. It's the first for them where Moses is not around. And so they are in uncommon ground, the ground where there is no Moses. The well-known leader is no longer with them. And now they have a new leader called Joshua. And so how are they going to perform is what we're going to read today. Now, Jericho was securely shut up. Now, here we have 2 words. In the Hebrew, Jericho was shut up. Now, shut up means closed, right? The gates were closed. Now, there was another word also by the same root word of shut up, but I think you can actually read this as completely barred. Barred or shuttered. Meaning they have totally locked themselves in. And the reason is the children of Israel. Remember, the news of how the children of Israel crossed the Jordan had arrived in their ears. In chapter 2, Rahab said that they heard about the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea and so on and so forth. But now they heard that the children of Israel had crossed the Jordan. And hence that in itself gave them the shivers. The text also tells us that none went out and none came in. Basically, to say that they are now under siege. Now, you must understand that the warfare of ancient times is very much a strategy of seizure, meaning you surround the city and you sit it out to prevent people from coming out or going in, so that they would run out of water and food, and then they will surrender. And that was the style of warfare. And so the Jericho is now prepared for this warfare. And so no one went out and no one is able to go in. So basically they've locked themselves up, and that's what verse 1 basically says. And we now see that God is the commander. This would be Jehovah. And he says to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king, the mighty man of valor. Basically, understand this. The word given is, well, I guess you can say approved. This whole idea comes from Deuteronomy chapter 1, 2, and 3. If you recall, when we were doing Deuteronomy, as the children of Israel under the leadership of Moses came up and it was passing through Edom, Moab, and Ammon. And God says, I have not given you their land, so don't disturb them. Until they came past Ammon, they came to the land of the Amorite, the king of Sihon and the king of Og, and God says, I have given it into your hands. And Moses was able to lead the children of Israel to take the place. This is a very important phrase. God has given. And by given means God has given approval, and God is allowing them to take over Jericho. And so the word given into your hands means very literally that you will be victorious. Now, even though it is said at this point in time that God says, I've given it into your hands, it is not like a present, right? Somebody's birthday and you buy a present and then you wrap it up in a bow and then just hand it over. This is not that at all. In the Hebrew sense of this word given, although it has the connotation of approval, or of allowing it to happen, of permitting it to happen, there is a sense of hope that there is victory in your hands. God is going to give over the king as well as the mighty men. This is the word Gibor, right? The Gibor, the victory, victorious, the strong men of strength, right? Of strength. And so Jericho is a very different place. They are supposed to be filled with strong men, people who are very experienced in warfare. And yet God had said that he is going to give it into your hands to a group of people who don't know warfare. And that is the meaning that God says, I am going to grant you victory. Now, what does that mean? And how is it translated into an experience? The experience is that God is going to give them the formula. And in that formula requires the children of Israel to pay attention and to be obedient. And so what you see is that give into your hand is a conditional aspect of giving. He says, you shall march around the city, all of the men of war. You shall go around the city. Around means go around the city once. You do this for 6 days. And then you also need to have 7 priests. Not just anyone. It needs to be priests and the number of 7. And what they do is that they need to have 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. And understand the word trumpets is shofar. And the shofar is made of ram's horns. You can actually have shofar from all kinds of animals with horns, but God only wants ram's horns. That's one. You also need to know that this is meant for the priests to blow the shofar. It is not common people to blow the shofar. And so in this case, you see that the shofar has to be blown in accordance to the requirements of God. And hence, given into your hands is conditional. Going all around the city is another aspect, and you do it once for 6 days. And it tells us a lot because God has specific requirements. That tells us another thing. This is God's war. And hence it must be done by God's requirements. On the 7th day, notice, and in some commentaries, the 7th day seems to be the Shabbat, the Sabbath. Because they would read the first day, second day as the normal course of the day of the week. And on the 7th day, that would be Sabbath day. And that's how the Jews read this anyways. And says, you shall march around the city 7 times, which tells us the 7th day, you have to do it special, different. And so you go around it 7 times, and the priest shall blow the trumpets. And it shall come to pass when they make a long with the ram's horn. Now understand this. This long means a delay, a drag. I'm not sure how you blow the shofar, but basically at this point in time, they would take the ram's horn and they blow it long and draggy. That's the picture here of long. And then when you hear the sound of the trumpet blowing this way, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and then the wall of the city will fall down flat. Now in verse 5, you need to understand that this word fall down flat means something which we don't see in the English. It actually means fall down underneath. And it really gives us a picture that the wall of Jericho is going to fall under its own weight, which means that the wall will crumble down under its own weight. That is the picture. So fall down flat really doesn't give us a full nuance that the wall of the city will crumble and collapse under its own weight. And we have discussed that in chapter 2, that the wall of Jericho is very thick, where Rahab actually lived in the wall. And so this is a miracle, right? How can a big, thick wall fall under its own weight? And then it says here, and all the people shall go up, every man straight before him. Now, this is another interesting element, and this one means ascend. And so when Jericho falls down, it means that there is now a path for them to go up. That is how the explanation, at least in the Hebrew, goes. And so it is not just fall down and it blocks the way. It falls down and it rolls down the hill because Jericho is on a mound. And this now provides them with a pathway to ascend into the city. That is the picture that we have. Now, after the instructions were given, then Joshua, the son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, lift up. This is lift up, right? Lift up the Ark of the Covenant and let 7 priests, not 6, not 8, and they need to, well, in verse 6 here it says that they need to bear and then lift up 7 trumpets of rams. Understand this is shofar, right? This is not a modern day instrument called a trumpet. This is the shofar. So each time you read in the Bible the word trumpet, it literally means a horn of an animal. And in this case, very specific, of rams, right? Ram horns. And so this word here, 7 trumpets of ram's horns, literally means 7 shofars of horns. Now, horns and trumpets, they are the same word, and there's only one. So they literally, it means 7 shofars of rams. Well, the word horns is actually added into for clarification. And they need to be standing in the face of the ark of the Lord. And so what is interesting is this basically says this. The Ark of the Covenant is carried by 4, and then you find that the 7 priests, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, each of them has a shofar, and they would be ahead, and this is where they would move. All right. And in continuation, you find that this is the other requirement. He said to the people, proceed and march around the city. And this one means what? Proceed means to pass by or pass over. And march round means to turn around the city. And basically what you find is that the people, those who are armed, will be ahead. Right? These are the armies of the people. And they will move ahead of the ark. So I'm just giving us the picture here. And so it was when Joshua spoken to the people, the 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram horns before the Lord passed and blew the trumpets. And so what you find is that while they are going around, they are blowing the horn, right? They are blowing the horn. And the Ark of the Covenant followed them, and that's right behind. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets. That's right here. Now, there is a rear guard that came after the ark while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. And that would tell you that there will be, well, they call it the rear guard. And these are the men of war who are there protecting the back of the ark. That is how the layout of the army of God is. It is important for us to have this picture in mind. So now Joshua had commanded the people, you shall not shout, you shall not make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth. So understand this. This is an A, this is a B, and this is a C. Basically, it tells them to keep quiet for this entire duration until the day I tell you to shout. Now, the idea of shout in verse 10 literally, how would I say, is to give a cry. This would be a war cry. This is not the shout, say, hey, you, hey there. It's not that kind of a word. This is literally a war cry. And then you make that war cry. So a war cry literally means it is a cry that is a call to arms. It's a call to fight. And it's really a call to scare the opponents. And so he had the ark of the Lord circle, go around the city, going around it once. And then they came back to the camp and they stayed in the camp. And that's the picture we are given now. Verse 12 tells us this. Joshua rose early in the morning, and this is the next day, right? The next day. The priest took the ark of the Lord, 7 priests, lifting 7 trumpets of ram horns in front of the ark, and then they were blowing the trumpets. The armed men went in front of them. The rear guard came after the ark. And then the priests continued blowing the trumpet and then going round the city. The second day, they go round once. And then they went to the camp and they did this for 6 days. Now, what have we seen? We have seen the narrative to tell us very clearly that they just go around the city once in that formation. So they have an actual formation, and they're not afraid of the Canaanites that's living in Jericho attacking them because they can't come out. They have been locked in themselves. And so we are seeing day 1, day 2, and then the narrative tells us they are doing this for 6 days. So you can't actually miss the narrative. Now, in verse 15, it came to pass on the 7th day, which they call the Shabbat, or the Sabbath, because the 7th day is also another name for the Sabbath. That's how the Jewish commentators would put this together. Now, those of us who are not Jewish oriented would read this as well. Well, it's just another 7th, the 7th day, just count to 7. But they have a particular nuance. They feel that this really represents a holy day, right? A holy day, which also means it's a special day. And being special, it means that the 7th day is going to be very different. And that's what it means, that they rose early. And notice, it's always early. Verse 15. Now, what do you mean by early? The idea here is that the idea of early here means it's the dawn of the day, when the sun is about to come out. That's what it means by the dawn of the day. The word here is they rise early, and the word early here is like an early start. How early is early? Right about the time when the sun is about to peer out of the horizon. And that's what it means by the dawning of the day. And they started to march around. Now, understand this, the word march is not the word march in English. This word march means to turn around, right? To turn around or to go around the city. And in this case, it is 7 times, right? And this is interesting because this seems to be the method, right? The manner. We call it the manner, but this is really the judgment. The word here is judgment. The judgment, or what we call the ordinance, the decision of God that tells them to do it 7 times. So this is not, I guess, it's not arbitrary. It is not because somebody flipped the coin. It is because God said so. And hence, this word is called a judgment, right? A mishpat, a mishpat. And on that day only, they march around the city 7 times. And again, this is to turn around that city 7 times. So this is a judgment of God in that sense. And the 7th time, when it happens, when the priests blew the trumpets. Now, understand this, they have been blowing the trumpets. But in this case, this would be the time where they drag out, right? They have a delay blowing. So they blow it long. And that is a special time as well. That Joshua said to the people, now shout. Understand this, that the word shout here is a war cry. Give out. Give a war cry. So it is not to shout out to your neighbor. This is to cry out. And this is for the Lord has given you the city. This is the time when you want to see God at work. That's the idea of the shout. Now the city shall be doomed by the Lord to destruction, it and all who are in it. Now understand this. This whole phrase in verse 17 is that God has doomed to destruction. What does this mean? Doom to destruction is haram, right? Haram. Haram literally means the thing that God has decided to destroy, right? And when God had so decided, this seems to be a total destruction. This seems to be a total destruction. All who are in it, except, and so there is an exception. The exception is Rachav, right? Rachav is that woman whom the spies went in. And so Rachav, the harlot, and so she is known with this practice in chapter 2. She shall live. She shall be kept alive. And both she and all who are with her in her house. Remember, that was a condition by the spies. They all need to be in the same place with Rachav because she hid the messengers that we sent. And this is in repayment for her loyalty. So in verse 18, and you by all means abstain from the accursed things. And this have to be understood. First of all, abstain means to keep away. Guard yourself from all the accursed things. This is the haram things that God has said, don't do, don't take, lest you become accursed. And this word means that you become haram. Now, we have always seen the word haram in the prophet books when the people do things that is violent, they are unjust, right? And so this is the same word that's been built all over. And God is unhappy when people are haram, when you take off the haram things, and then you make the camp of Israel a curse, which means a haram. The curse is on Jericho. Don't make Israel a curse as well. The trouble, what trouble are we talking about? The trouble is a car. A car means to stir up. And this would be to stir up the wrath of God. So don't make Israel the same as Jericho. That's basically what God is saying. All the valuables, the gold, the silver, and the bronze, the iron, all these metal things, says that it will come and they are to be consecrated. And the word consecrated here means to be set apart. Right? Made holy. And then you'll be wondering, why is it that the people can't take it, but God can? And so God says, all this belongs to me, and they shall be put into the treasury of the Lord. What is the treasury of the Lord? This word literally means the storehouse. God's storehouse, and if you like, God's bank. And so God has a bank where the priest will take charge, and this will be used for God's purpose. So when God makes it for his purpose, he calls it made holy. When they are told don't touch it, they are called accursed things, haram, things which are haram, who are accursed. And so God has rules. And so why would something be haram and not be haram? God's decree. And so now they're beginning to see one thing. This is God's war. God decides what is holy and not. God is leading this charge and providing the strategy. And so God is before them to teach them how to take over their enemies. And so God's war, God's rules, God's laws, God's rules. It's very important. Now we come to verse 20. After God has given the rules of engagement, the rules of engagement is very critical, because that is what is called a judgment of God. And the judgment of God has been placed upon Jericho, and they are haram, and the Israelites are warned not to be like them, and if they violate, they too will be haram, and trouble will be upon them. And so they need to be obedient. And so now you notice this entire strategy of war and all the mechanics of this war is a test of their faithfulness, not only to God, but to Joshua. Why? Because you would realize that this is a very unusual war stratagem. I mean, who would just go around the city blowing shofar and then go home and sleep? And do that for 6 days. And then come the seventh day, they'll go around 7 times, and then they will cry out. Now, all of these are an unusual strategy. Nobody does that except the Israelites, because this is God's strategy. God has said, I will give you, and then if you believe and you will follow, all will be well. If you don't follow, in fact, it is not that you won't get. If you conquer the place and you violate the terms of engagement, God will punish the Israelites instead. And so you understand that all of this is a test for Joshua, for the people, for the priests to listen and follow everything to its iota. And in verse 20, the people cried out when the priest blew the trumpet, and this will be the final drag, and it will be one long drawn. And it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet blowing one last time, long and drawn, the people shouted with a mighty shout, and the wall fell down flat again. I want to point out to you in verse 20, the wall fell down under itself. It means that the wall collapsed straight down and the people went up into the city. Now, went up means that they could now run up to the city before him, and they took the city, which means that the wall of the city crumbled and the people can now go up the city. And the walls that crumbled did not block their entry. And that is a miracle. Now, these are words which we don't read in the English, but I just want to point out to you that's basically what it meant. Falling down under itself and allowing them to climb up to the city. And then they utterly destroyed. They completely destroyed. They seized the city and they actually destroyed the city, man, woman, young, old, ox, sheep, donkey, with the edge of the sword. Now, you would think that this is really an incredible judgment, and indeed it is. Because this city had a background where God is ultimately angry with them and pronounce a judgment, and they have not repented. And this in itself is a violent judgment on the entire city. Man, woman, young and old, all the animals within, by the edge of the sword. And what was kept were the gold, silver, bronze, and iron, to be kept in the storehouse of God for the purpose of the future. Verse 22, Joshua had said to the two men who had spied out the country, the two spies, now you go back to the harlot's house, Rachav, and from there bring out the woman and everyone who is with her as you swore to her. And now I want to bring you to this word. The idea of swearing is to repeat 7 times, as Jehovah lives, this is what we will do. And by this oath, it means that it must be kept. And so Joshua is very careful to make sure that the two men kept the oath that the children of Israel is faithful to what is honored and said to God. And so the young men who had been spies went in, brought out Rachav, father, mother, brothers, and everyone she had. And they brought out all her relatives and left them outside the camp of Israel. Not in the camp of Israel, separate. And so this is what you need to understand. Separate from the camp of Israel. And then they burned the city to the ground. This is the idea of burning the city with fire and everything that was in it. And so this is the vivid imagery of destruction. So only the silver, gold, bronze, and iron were kept in the storehouse of the house of the Lord. And Joshua spared Rachav, the harlot, father's household, all that she had, and now she dwells in Israel to this day. So as it was written, the book of Joshua, Rachav was still alive and she was dwelling in the land that now belongs to Israel, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent. So this means that her good deeds, her valiant deeds. And this is because she knows Jehovah, the God of Israel. And so she said there is no way that she can go against God. And so she protected the children of Israel. And so this is the faith, what called the reward of the faithfulness of Rahab. Verse 26. Then Joshua charged them. The word charge them means swore to them. And remember the idea of swearing. It is a serious oath that must be kept at the time, saying, "Cursed be the man before the Lord who rises up and builds this city, Jericho." And this is swearing in front of the people that the city of Jericho will never be rebuilt again, that he shall lay its foundation with his firstborn, and with his youngest he shall set up its gates. Now, what does that mean? These are words that says, lay its foundation with the firstborn, the youngest with its gates. This is an A and a B. And basically, it means that it will never be rebuilt. Not now, not ever, and never again, because there will be no more firstborn. There will be no more youngest, because the men, women, young and old were all killed. So it would never, ever be rebuilt. So these are what we call expressions. All right. So the final verse, the Lord was with Joshua. And the word with means together with. Such that the people now, the Israelites, know that God was with Joshua. And his fame, the word fame literally means the report, right? It means a rumor, because it's a word of mouth, right? The news about Joshua and what he did spread out throughout all the country. Now, the word country is another instance where this literally means land, Aretz. And so the English loves to use a thesaurus and play with the word, so that you find that the English doesn't repeat itself too often, that it reads well in the English language. But in the Hebrew, they keep using the same word, land, aretz, so that you know that they are in the land. And all the kings of the land, they are now even more afraid of the Israelites, particularly now with Joshua. And this word, fame, literally means shomar, right? Shomar. It is the news about what Joshua did to Jericho. Now, you may wonder, why is it so, what's the big deal with Jericho? In fact, if you are aware, Jericho is probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest city of Jericho, of the land. And so when Joshua coming across the river, having an army that never had experience of warfare like the people in Jericho, and took down Jericho and completely wiped them out, tells a lot about the power that goes with the Israelites and Joshua. And because of this case, you find that everyone in the land begins to shiver in their pants, so to speak, whenever they hear that, oh, the Israelites are coming. So remember what Moses said? When you get into the land, the fear of you will be in them. And this is what it means. The fear of Israel will be in all the people of the land. And the people of the land is afraid of the Israelites, not because the Israelites were big in number, not because the Israelites were tall, not because the Israelites were strong, not because the Israelites were mighty in warfare, but because there was a leader and there was a God with Israel that led them to war that no man can stand up to them. That is what is happening. So let this be our lesson, that this whole chapter of chapter 6 is about God leading the charge. And the news that's going out is not that the Israelites were so great, was that the God of the Israelites was great. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 6.